Hello, and welcome to Dual Credit U.S. History B discussion board for lesson 4. Okay, for this lesson, you're going to look at a slideshow and you're going to answer these questions about the women's suffrage movement, about when did women's suffrage start, who was involved, what happened with the women's suffrage movement after the Civil War, who were the suffragists, what were the beliefs of the anti-suffragists, and who led the final push for women's suffrage. So here is the slideshow, which I think is super cool, and it talks about the American women suffrage movement, which is the right to vote, or enfranchisement. Okay, so what do you see here? Around what year do you think this photograph was taken? And how do you think the people responded? It says, Kaiser Wilson, have you forgotten your sympathy with the poor Germans because they were not self-governed? 20 million American women are not self-governed. Take the beam out of your own eye. Okay? So that's kind of an interesting way to look at it right to begin with here. All right. Seneca Falls in New York in 1848. Many women were involved in abolition, anti-slavery, and the temperance, no alcohol movements, or prohibition. Okay. There was a conference in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848 that was led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, and the conference attendees wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, which was a lot like the Declaration of Independence, sort of, for the women, okay? And then the 15th Amendment was passed in 1871, so right after the Civil War, and it granted African American men the right to vote, but it disappointed many who thought women would be enfranchised at the same time. African Americans were split over whether men should get the vote before women. Okay, so that was kind of a thing, and it was passed by the Radical Republicans. If you were with my last class, my U.S. History A class, you would know about the Radical Republicans who passed this amendment, okay? Frederick Douglass in 1869 said, when women, because they are women, are dragged from their houses and hung upon lampposts, when their children are torn from their arms, and their brains dashed upon pavements, then they will have the urgency to obtain ballots equal to our own. But was this not true for black women? Yes, yes, yes. It is true for black woman, but not because she is a woman, but because she is black. So that's kind of interesting sentiment to look at. Sojourner Truth talked about there was a great stir about colored men getting their rights, but not a word about the colored women. And if colored men get their rights and not colored women theirs, you see the colored men will be masters over the women, and it will be just as bad as it was before. Okay, so those are pretty deep words right there. Before 1910, there was the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were the big leaders for that, and their two big strategies were to win suffrage state by state and to pass a constitutional amendment which required ratification by 36 states. Okay, and so they were actually Susan B. Anthony in the late 1800s. She tried several times to introduce an amendment bill for women's suffrage, but it was always killed in the Senate. Those who opposed extending the right to vote were called anti-suffragists. Many anti-suffragists were women. All right. This is a political cartoon mocking antis. Oh, save us, senators, from ourselves. Okay. Political cartoons, I think, are the best. Beliefs of anti-suffragists. They said that women were high-strung, irrational, and emotional. Women were not smart or educated enough. Women should stay at home. Women were too physically frail. They would just get tired walking to the polling station, and they would become masculine if they voted. Okay, so we don't even want it. It would be better for us to just stay home, right? So this is the map of women's suffrage before 1920. And the first state to give women the right to vote was Wyoming in 1869, and then Utah in 1870. And the reason that I know that is because I taught Utah history for about 1,000 years. So there you go. Elizabeth Cady Stanton died in 1902. Susan B. Anthony died in 1906. Many young middle-class women still joined the suffrage movement, and they also joined the cause, hoping to hoping the right to vote would help improve working conditions. And Carrie Chapman Catt led the NAWSA. She believed in careful state-by-state strategy, supporting President Wilson even though he didn't outright support suffrage because the Democrats were a safer bet than Republicans. And she also supported acting ladylike so as not to embarrass the movement. Alice Paul led the NWP and believed in a more aggressive strategy. She focused on passing the constitutional amendment. She adopted unladylike strategies from British suffragettes, so like heckling, picketing, that kind of thing. And she also refused to support President Wilson if he wouldn't support women's suffrage. The rights of the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. Tennessee was the 36th state to ratify, and it passed by only one vote. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by the state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Okay, so that was what it said. So hopefully that helped you to answer these questions about the suffragettes and about the suffrage movement. This would count as a muckraker movement, okay, and as something that the muckrakers were trying to do to better society at this point in time. So that definitely is one of the things. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'm excited to see what you have to say about it. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.